Hi, welcome back everyone. This is Mihai Algiu and Peter Ingle. In this playlist, this is podcast or episode number 34 on reigniting the fragments of the fourth way, where we tackle both theoretically as well as experientially, practically, core ideas of the fourth way, Gurdjieff, Uspensky teaching, in the context of also the teachings of non-duality, as well as, coming from where I'm coming from as a somatic psychotherapist. I'm informed by understanding of working with our suffering and trauma and so on. So this is episode number 34, and you'll see here the whole playlist. So today, this is something that we wanted to do for a long time, but now the time has come, and we are going to tackle an idea that crosses both the cosmology aspect of the system as well as the psychological aspect. It's an idea, some knowledge that is at the intersection of those two. And in hearing this idea, we invite you, as we are invited in the fourth way, to not believe what we are going to say, but have an open mind and try to verify these ideas in yourself based on your observation, but still be open. And also, these are not our ideas. We didn't concoct them. So we have received these ideas. And so what we're going to talk about today is this idea of planetary essence body type. Planetary body type, essence body type, which are, we use the Enneagram in order to distinguish them and to understand them better. And this idea, Gurdjieff alludes to this. I remember reading that whenever he was having groups and circles, he wanted to have enough people so there are enough students from each type. He wasn't saying what those types are, but he seemed to be very precise about having that all these machines, the human body biocomputer, the three-brain being with the capacity of awakening self-consciousness, they come in different distinct flavors. And also a student, a prominent student of the fourth way, Rodney Collin, he developed this idea in his studies, and then this became more crisp and more elaborate in the school, fourth way school, that Peter and myself were part of. And maybe we can start making a little distinction between some other theory which may be confusing for people, and we want to clarify what's the difference. So these days there is the last 20 years or so, and in the books, and whenever you put Enneagram on internet, you are going to find information about these personality types. They have numbers and a certain keyword identifying that particular type of personality or ego pattern, and they are placed on the Enneagram, although from our knowledge that seem to be arbitrarily inserted in there. So this, what we are talking here, the essence planetary body types, is not that at all. And from my understanding of those types, of the personality, ego pattern, body type, this is a psychological distinction based on some observation on types of egos. And egos, it would be that which we are not, that which is formed as a result of our conditioning, our adaptive patterns. It's based on what we are not It's more like how our false self developed and what are its keys feature. And this essence body types that we are going to discuss now, the idea is that at the moment of conception and birth, a certain planetary alignment and celestial emanations, they are influences the embryo, and they are going to influence and control what will be the future human being, determining its most active glandular system. So based on certain celestial alignment, this will influence that one gland in our endocrine system works stronger. And then this gland will determine a certain type of our body, actually how the body will look like in terms of height and size and width and different characteristics of very observable bodily features. So, but it will also determine this celestial alignment and primary gland that will be more active in us will determine not just the physical characteristics and the appearance, but also our psychology, some type of tendencies in our essence. Yeah, so that's an important distinction. These are qualities and features of our essence, and as in the fourth way, essence is what we came here with, and it's prior to conditioning, prior to programming and adaptation. And yeah, so in essence, as we talked before, our essence is a mixture of spirit, it's that which is aware, presence, that's the pure essence, is consciousness, with some unique, let's say, individual tendencies of being in the world, of thinking in a certain way, of tackling relationships, of tackling our life. So these are essence characteristics. So once again, through studying this knowledge and through self-remembering and being more awake, we can actually see these types sometimes just by looking at the person, the way they look. We don't even need to know them. Although as we know them, that may become more confirmed. Although there are some types that is not so clear, so then it helps to know them a little bit, and then it will be revealed. And one last idea before I pass it to you, Peter, is that, so according to this theory, each type in one's essence is wired to operate in a certain way, and these are some essence tendencies, inclinations, preferences, setting, some essence setting. And this, as we know, that through the process of education and growing up, our essence is cultured, is programmed. We receive many other layers of education, imprints from our parents, society, religion, teachers, as well as our handling life, meeting adversity, and then we develop other layers of our psychological future self on top of our essence. So the idea that with this, basically when we are going to study each type has a certain essence tendencies, and also certain, all of them, they tend, that essence tendency, when we become asleep, and primarily in false personality, that essence tendency turns into some kind of ego tendency, which is somehow connected to our essence, but that becomes what we talked before as a chief feature. Oh, I forgot to say here is that this video is going to be more of a introduction, context, and talking generally, globally about all types in terms of their distinction between them. They break down in several categories. We are going to talk about why it is relevant in our awakening process of the work of awakening. Why is it helpful to know about these things? And we are not going to go in each individual type, but we are planning to continue this talk with several other videos where we go into individual types and describe each one of them, as well as the combined types, because it is seldom that we are just one type. We tend to have we are more primarily have like maybe 40, 50, 60% of one type, and then we have other tendencies, or we have a little bit of another type, secondary type or tertiary type. But each person is, generally speaking, has the gravity of the type in one type or in two types. So now we are going to talk more generally, globally, zoomed out perspective, and in future meetings we go into details with each one of them, as well as with examples, maybe photos. So here we go.
Yes, I'd also like to add that one of the significant things about this idea, and take it as a theory for now, as Mihai was saying, keep your mind open to this idea, consider it as a theory, and then let it sink in a little bit and see if you can verify for yourself how true it is, if there's truth behind this idea about body types, planetary types. And one of the big ideas here is that we are not separate. Everything's connected. So just, for example, in the solar system is one. Everything's connected. The sun, the planets, the earth, and the moon are all connected like an engine, like a clockwork. Everything influences everything else and works together. And the principle of body types is that, and this is based on what the fourth way calls the law of three. There are three forces that come into play that create all of organic life on Earth, which includes human beings. The mineral kingdom, vegetable kingdom, animal kingdom, and human kingdom comprise organic life, along with the oceans, the atmosphere, etc. Everything apart from the solid mass of the Earth. And there are three influences that there's a conflux of these influences. One is this huge, powerful energy coming from the sun, influencing us and influencing the earth in many ways that we don't know about, as well as know about. The second influence is the earth itself, the solid mass of the earth itself, this rock, if you will, in space. And the third influence is that which comes from the planets. And this includes our moon. You could think of the moon as an embryonic planet, and it has a big, powerful effect on this surface around the planet, on organic life on Earth. So these three influences come into play: the sun, the Earth itself, and the planets. And together, these influences, these energies, they're responsible for the creation of all the forms of life on the surface of the Earth. So it's a very big idea. But part of this is that this is how human beings take shape, take form, and they take form in a physiological way, as Mihai was saying, our physical construction, our size, our shape, our mass, our metabolism, our body chemistry, all of this is on the physical, physiological side. And then also how our psychology takes shape, certain tendencies. Different people tend to have a different psychological approach to life, view of life, response to life. And all of this then generates the idea we have of ourselves as a person. Our physical makeup and our psychological makeup influence tremendously how we basically think of ourselves as a self, as a person, as I. And what we're introducing here is these nuances that come in the form of these body types. Now, in the Briggs-Myers system, in the personality type system, all of these other systems that have become popularized in the latter half of the 20th century and continue now. And you see this in business, you see it in the military, you see it in social different groups. They use this idea. But what they do is they put it on the Enneagram, and there are 9 points on this Enneagram. And somebody assumed that therefore there are 9 basic types. But according to the fourth way system, Enneagram, this is not correct. It's a distortion of the real idea, which is that there are really 6 points on the Enneagram that are related to the idea we're talking about. The other 3 points on the Enneagram don't correlate with the idea of types. So there are 6 points on the outside of this Enneagram circle. And in the middle, there is a 7th point to represent the sun. So the sun is this big influence. And then on the circle, there are these 6 planetary influences, and they include the 5 interior planets of the solar system, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Saturn, Jupiter. Those are the 5 interior planets before you get to the asteroid belt. So it's just those 5 interior planets, and then also the moon. So now that's 6 planetary influences bearing down on us in collusion with the influences of the sun and the mass of the earth. And this is what is said to determine these body types. And then, as Mihai also said, each of these planets, according to this theory, is a transmits a particular kind of influence to the major endocrine glands in our system. And as we will be showing you, each body type is being influenced primarily by one of these planetary or the sun influences. And this is dictating the physical and psychological makeup of the individual. And the idea is that everyone on Earth fits into this categorization of types or combination of types. So just to reiterate, this isn't just some idea about how people behave. I'm a follower, you're a leader, this and that. I procrastinate, you're always building things. It's much more than just our behavior. It's our physiology and our psychology and why they are the way that they are. And to note, the fourth way points out that this idea, this theory of body types, is the result of these influences of the sun, the planet, and the earth. This is the cause, the origin of our physical and psychological makeup. These other systems of personality types and so on, if you ask them, what is the origin of what determines all of these different types? There is no answer. They don't have an answer. But the fourth way this system explains that the origin is these celestial influences. And that's how we'll be breaking this down now, is to keep that in mind. We're not just talking about human behavior. We're talking about, in fact, human behavior is just the surface of it. We're talking about the inherent physiological and psychological makeup of human beings as determined by the influences within the solar system. Mihai?
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes when I explain this in a more street fashion, not having much time, I like to use the comparison with like breeds of dogs. Like they're all dogs, yeah? the same ancestor, the wolf. But we can have Chihuahuas, we can have a Doberman, we can have a German Shepherd, we can have a tall Dane, we can have a poodle. And all of them, although they are dogs, they have a very distinct kind of energy, flavor, temperament, as well as appearance, inclinations, tendencies. And the same way it is with humans, although we all can recognize this as being human beings, but all the idea in the system here is that in all races, this typology spans across all races, but basically all human beings are divided into these 7 primordial types and the combination of them. And they are, as we get the knowledge and as we also are aware enough and we observe this in ourselves and in a small group of people, we start to kind of, it jumps at us, seeing in other people, seeing in stars, in politicians, in our family. It just stands out, their flavor, their energy, and it's very different from one another. And you can see it in adults, you can see it in little children in the school. You can see that although they didn't receive much programming and too much personality is very weak yet, and they are mostly in essence, they have different essences. One is freckled and very active and very energizing and has some temper tantrums, and another one is more grounded little child, more quiet, more observing. However, he has these ideas and want people to he wants to be the leader of a certain team, to build a certain fort, and tells people what to do. Some other people are just there, very sweet and wanting to connect and to do what to be a good follower. Some other people are looking at it from a side. Some other kids looking from the side, not wanting to engage. So these are already some characteristics of these types. And an important idea here is that none of them is better than the other. None of these types. So as we are going to describe them, our mind may get the idea like, oh, this is nice to be, this is better, or this type is weaker or something. I don't know. Our mind, our personality may have such evaluations, but the idea in the system is that from the point of view of a wakefulness, and from the point of view of possibility of evolution, of waking up and completing ourselves, none of them is better than the other. All of them, no matter what kind of strength and weaknesses may have in the world, they are equally mechanical. It's very important. All types are equally mechanical, automatic, wired in a way that the person has no merit of having certain tendencies or the body in a certain way. It was just given. It's like a car, exactly. It's like the Beamer. There is a Volkswagen, there is a Cadillac, there is this or that. Although, with the cars, we get the sense that some are more expensive and better than the other, but with the human beings, it's not like that. So we are assigned, they are assigned to us, and there is no merit. No type is more, it's more, you are ahead of the evolutionary process because of this type. So it's not like that. They are all living in the second state, in a state of waking sleep, dreaming, imagining. They all live in separation, and they all represent as a house out of which the self awakens to itself.
Yes, another way to say that, if I may, Mihai, is that, and this is useful to keep in mind as we go through all these types talking about this, what this is, one way to look at this is a comprehensive, detailed description of what consciousness is not. You can think of it this way, that awareness consciousness, this pure, invisible, formless consciousness, comes into the container of a human being. When the human being is born, the embryo forms, and then this little human being emerges from the womb and is born on earth. That is the container. It has a physiological and a psychological makeup. And now awareness, like a seed, is planted in this container. And what happens is, because awareness is unknown to itself and prone to what is called identification, it attaches as a sense of identity to this form of the human being, both physiologically and psychologically, both in terms of the body and in terms of the mind. It forms itself into this identity by virtue of attaching and becoming identified with, meaning establishing a sense of identity in and in relation to. And the reason we want to study this idea and know about it is not to know our type and to know other people's types and to somehow master this information, but to understand that everything we witness physiologically and psychologically about these types is a witnessing of this container. And it is not consciousness, it is not awareness. And awareness is trying to realize itself and liberate itself from a feeling of identity with this body and this mind, this physiology and this psychology, and the sense of I that permeates them. And that's why we want to know this. We don't want to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the details of type for their own sake. We want to recognize when we look at another person and we look at ourselves, we're witnessing the container. We're not witnessing the silence of their being. And we want to come to understand this. In non-duality, for example, the focus is all on what is awareness. Understand this awareness, abide as this awareness, realize as this awareness. And it's a very focused way of intuiting and realizing awareness itself, or awareness realizing itself. The fourth way includes all of this elaborate description of what awareness is not, because we are so accustomed to thinking that this is who we are. And so we're sort of backing out of it by virtue of understanding it.
Yeah, and in the non-dual teachings, they talk about, they just say the body-mind mechanism. And so these types are actually, these body minds, they are actually very complex, and this teaching goes in depth to see that this body mind, it comes in different flavors. And yeah, as I said,
And the way we have the types of imagination we experience, the types of negative emotions we are prone to, and things like this are directly tied to this information about body types. And everyone is not the same. This is why you can't have the same practice for everyone. It's also why you can't have the same diet for everyone. You can't have almost the same laws for everyone, because people are so different. And this knowledge about body types can be so useful and can bring so much scale and relativity to our perception of ourselves and of others and of the world, and enable us to become less and less identified with what we see and to see it all more objectively, not to take it so subjectively, but to see it as it is.
yeah, so although in the world, throughout the history of civilization, different body types were favored. You can see this in art. Maybe in the 1400, the symbol of feminine beauty was a certain type, more like round, the jovial Venusian. We'll get into it later. That was the symbol of beauty. Now, after a few hundred years, the symbol of feminine beauty is like a Mercury Saturn, like tall, lanky, skinny. And so, although there are certain earthly preferences and biases that keep changing, as I said before, from the point of view of awakening, none of them is better than the other. And no matter what type we are, the same kind of need of conscious effort and prolonged application for many years is necessary. And they are examples of sages of each type. Basically, one can see that. And another element is that remember that these body essence types are in our essence, yeah, and the same way in which our center of gravity is in our essence. We talked previous talks, but so we can hold this in mind too. We are explaining this hologram of the body types, but we have explained before the hologram of looking at the human being from the point of view of four centers, and each human being is centered in one center of gravity, either intellectual, emotional, instinctive, moving. So actually these two holograms, they combine, because you can have a instinctively centered Saturn, or you can have an emotionally centered Saturn, and you can have an intellectual centered Saturn, and so on. And the Saturn is Saturn. However, they may have slight different flavors depending on their center of gravity. And the idea that these are in essence, they are not going to change. This is not going to change. However, through conscious inner work and this purifying of that which is false, and through strengthening our essence tendencies and letting go of false personality, inner considering, all of this, so through growth of being, there will be some changes in a way that we are going to, through growth of being, although the type remains the type. Basically, there is some kind of conscious movement on the Enneagram, where for inner work, I let go of the most mechanical tendencies of my own type that bring suffering to myself and sabotage me, and they don't help from the point of view of consciousness. Those will get purified. I'm retaining certain innate helpful tendencies, and also of my type, and also through conscious inner work, I am slightly moving on the Enneagram. I may acquire some of the qualities, tendencies of the next type on the Enneagram. As we are going to see, the types on the Enneagram, they combine in a certain way, following a certain path, so there is a certain route. So we remain the type. However, the more conscious we are, we became more less stuck in a small room of our type. It's almost like we are expanding and becoming less stuck to certain innate tendencies. Yeah, we are more free from our type while still having the type.
Another way to say it is we become less identified as a feeling of I in our particular type. And this liberates us. And now we can relate more easily to the point of view of other types. And we can better understand the tendencies and empathize with the tendencies of other types, because we recognize them in ourselves as well. We're not stuck so much in this entrenched in this a central point of a feeling of I as our type.
Another idea is that the idea left the mind.
Maybe we could show this diagram.
Yeah, bring it up. Actually, that came back into the mind. Yeah, another reason of why it's important to know about this, fourth way is being a progressive path. It doesn't jump straight to the cherry on the top, but establishes a gradual foundation of inner work, and part of that is to know oneself fully. Part of becoming more conscious is to know oneself, knowing oneself. And this knowing oneself has two components: to know our type, know our tendencies, know our center of gravity, know how the centers operate, know our idiosyncrasies and inner contradictions and lies, yeah, to know our personality, to know our essence, to know our type, as well as to know the self. Yeah, but in the fourth way, we are kind of going from the foundation. So this is part of knowing our equipment here, knowing our psychology.
So this just shows this what we mentioned earlier, that there's the influence of the sun and there's the influence of the earth itself, and then the planetary bodies, the main planetary bodies closest to us in the solar system, including the moon. And so each type, and you see there are 3 points on the Enneagram which are not represented here. They are not related to this idea of types. And there's a circulation of types through this Enneagram, but in general, there's a moon type, a lunar type. There's a Venus type or Venusian type. There is a Mercury or mercurial type, a Saturn or Saturnine, a Mars or what's called martial, and a Jupiter or what's called jovial type. And then the sun is a solar type. So these are the 7, this is the organization and relationship of the 7 fundamental types in human beings. And there's a circulation, as we mentioned, and it starts with the moon, the lunar type. And this idea is based on something Rodney Collin developed, which is it represents the reflection of light or the brilliance of light in the solar system. And when we look out in the night sky, the most brilliant thing we see is the moon at night. Of course, the sun is the brightest object in our sky, but in the night sky, the brightest object is the moon, followed by Venus. It's less brilliant than the moon, Venus, and then Mercury, which is less brilliant than Venus. And then the movement switches over to the other side. It switches to the Saturn type, Saturnine type. And here now, there is increasing brilliance, meaning Saturn is less brilliant in the sky than Mars, the planet Mars. Mars is brighter than Saturn. And then Jupiter is even brighter than Mars in the night sky. And this is meant to show that the circulation of body types on Earth, the relationship, the correlation between types on the planet Earth in the form of human beings, has its correspondence to the movement of light within the solar system, light reflecting from the sun and to the planets and then back onto the Earth. So this is showing, again, as above, so below, what's happening in the solar system, and let's call it a physical way or magnetic way, or the way that light is transmitted throughout the solar system, has its corollary in us, physically and psychologically.
Yeah, so keep this a little bit more. So as we are going to each type, we are going to start to talk about the Venusian, how the Venusian looks like and how it is and how it manifests and all of that. So we are going to go in each one of them as a pedagogical, didactical, for the sake of clarity. But as we are going to see later, they are combination of types. And we can look at it like there's a Venus-Mercury type, or there's Mercury-Saturn type, or there's Saturn-Mars type, or Mars-Jupiter, Mars-Jovial type, or Jovial-Lunar type. Yeah, so as you see, they combine according to this direction of this pathway. Yeah, the type don't combine arbitrarily. We can't have Venus-Mars or a Saturn-Venusian type. Yeah, so it's important to get used to putting them on the Enneagram. It will help. So as we get more refined in this, we are going to first know how a Venus type is and how a Mercury type is. And then we'll see how the Venus-Mercury is like a mixture in a certain range of the combined qualities of the two. And another idea in the system is that another way to look at their combination of types is that, let's say, one could be centered in, one has most into a type, like Saturn, yeah, one is Saturn, but one has a little bit of the wing, a little bit of the type of the wing, so a little bit of Mars, Southern Mars, and a little bit of Mercury. So that is possible because it's in this wing pathway. We are going to go into this later. But one last thing here is that the solar type, it's so one can have a more pure solar type, but also the solar type is the only type that can combine arbitrarily with any type. So we can have a solar jovial, solar Saturn, solar lunar, solar Mars, which is a combination of that type plus the solar tendencies. So the solar is the only one that can combine with any of them. Yeah, it dawned on me somehow that all of these types are necessary for the equilibrium, for the survival of humanity as a species. They are necessary somehow, I assume. And I get a sense that through this very detailed body type knowledge, it's almost like having some leaks from the architect's blueprint. I get this sense, like we are getting inside information from how the architect developed humanity, God, or whatever forces are responsible for all of this. And it's like in a car factory, different blueprints of different things like that.
And the idea is too that, remember, according to the ray of creation, there are these influences passing all the way from the source of the entire ray of creation down throughout the different levels or dimensions of this ray of creation of what we call the universe. And the idea is that influences have to pass from higher dimensions to lower dimensions in such a way as to form these lower dimensions. And that theoretically, they will also pass back up the ray of creation. One being a descending, what's called a descending octave, another an ascending octave. And so the theory is that the sun and the planets and the earth, the mass of the earth itself, are working together to allow a certain kind of energy or variety of energies in very particular form to pass to the moon, to pass from humanity serving as a filter in the solar system through which these influences have to pass and be affected in such a way as to influence the growth and development of the moon. But also remember, this light is reflecting throughout the solar system, meaning what happens on Earth in the form of human behavior and human life in the life of humanity also in some way influences the other planets and may even influence the sun itself by reflecting back somehow. So this is not an arbitrary thing. All of these are working as one, and each type is a variation on this theme designed for a particular reason to receive a particular kind of energy and then transmit it accordingly, serve as the filter for it as it passes through this ray of creation, and in particular throughout the solar system. Again, this is a very big idea. When you start backing up and looking at it as a whole like this, it becomes very profound. And this is true of all of organic life on Earth. We're not just here living life, and no, it's all connected to something much bigger.
The bigger picture. So in preparation for going into each type, which will be next talks, we'll just now go into all these 7 types. They are divided into several subcategories that we are going to touch upon here. So some of the types are active types, and some of them are passive types, and we are going to explain what that is. Some types are a positive type, and some other types are negative type. And some types are masculine type, some are feminine type. Yeah, all of the types, all the planets, the types, they divide into these three parameters: feminine, masculine, active, passive, and what was the third one?
Male or masculine or feminine.
Masculine or feminine. And so and once again, there's no merit, there is nothing is better than the other. It's all equally mechanical and equally the same possibilities for evolution. And we are going to explain now a little bit more what those terms mean: active, passive, feminine, masculine. So if you could bring
And
it.
in this way too, this is how these types balance one another. This Enneagram is meant to remember, this is just a pictorial representation of laws and of processes in the ray of creation. And there's a balance. Everything's in harmony. Everything's in balance. And that's true with the types too. The types balance one another in this play of humanity, this soup of humanity. Everything is in balance, whether we see it that way or not much of the time. It's actually all in balance all the time.
And in this slide, you can see, we are not going to go into it now, but you will also get the most active gland that governs the psychology and the physiology and the physical appearance. You can see that associated with each type, together with the active, passive, positive, negative, masculine, feminine. So, active types versus passive type. So what does that mean? It means that some types are more driven, more active, both outside in their life, how they are busy about their day, as well as internally. They are kind of in initializing stuff, starting things, getting things done. They have an innate tendency to do that. If we were to restrain them, they will feel uncomfortable. So there's kind of a doer. It's a doer, making things happen, driven, bubbly with ideas and activities. And the passive type, passive is, although they have all the capacity to, and still they are active and doing things in the world and all of that, their sense of a default, like a comfortable default, is to be more passive, more stationary, so to say. They are more like responding. They are more like responding to stimuli, responding to life, responding to needs, responding to active types, but they are more comfortable in a stationary stance. If you have any thoughts on this.
Yes, just one of the thoughts that came when you were going through your description there is that this is why people don't understand other people. Someone who's very active can't understand why somebody else is so passive. And the active types expect passive types to be active. And passive types expect active types to be more passive. And when you come to understand this, it makes life a lot easier because you realize some people are naturally active. They cannot help it. They are driven, as Mihai is saying, they're driven by their planet and by their gland. And the way energy flows through their body and through their bloodstream is in an active form. And they have active inertia, whereas the other people have passive inertia. And they're more sluggish, slow. It doesn't mean they're necessarily dumb or lazy or anything like that. It means they process, for example, mentally more slowly. They move physically more slowly. It's a more passive way of manifesting as a human being, where the active types are fast, quick, not in a hurry, but moving all the time, getting things done. And that could be happening mentally, not just physically, but they have an active mind. It works faster. It makes connections faster. This is why standardized tests don't work for everyone. This is why the educational system doesn't necessarily work for everyone. It's set up under the assumption that everyone's the same and that everyone learns the same way, and it's not true. Active types learn differently than passive types, generally speaking. And as we'll see, that's true of each type. So this is invaluable to know this, and it's kind of surprising really, the more you learn to see all this, it's surprising this isn't understood, known about, accepted in humanity, in cultures, in societies, in school systems, between countries. It's astonishing, really. This goes unseen, unnoticed by most of humanity. And it's powerful information.
Thank you. Very good. So the active types, I guess you can see on Enneagram, the active types are the Mercury, Saturn, and Mars, and the Sun. So these are the 4 active types, and then
And by the way, the A stands for active, the P stands for passive. In
yeah,
this, the other symbols mean something else we'll get into, but A means active, P means passive.
yeah, the other 3 are the passive type. So the next criteria is of feminine versus masculine type, and this is unrelated to our sex or genre. So one can be a male, the male sex, that be in a feminine type, and vice versa. So masculine or feminine in this typology, I would say that the Chinese yin and yang gives more of I think it's more relevant and accurate for this description. So the yang is like a masculine, active, penetrating, slightly, activating, making things happen, with all the yang qualities of the masculine qualities. And then the feminine type is more of the receptive, less masculine. Help me out here, Peter.
Well, yes, more absorbing, more receptive, sometimes more empathetic, more allowing, more nurturing. These are all feminine qualities according to this breakdown. It doesn't mean, it means a certain chemistry, again, a physiological and a psychological chemistry, has a more what we call, because we're familiar with these terms, a more feminine side, a more feminine nature. And sometimes you can feel someone, you just touch them and they're more absorbing, softer, more accepting, yielding. And it's true of their psychology as well. Other people are more the active or the masculine types. They're more on the go. They're slightly more aggressive. Mihai used the word penetrating. They're more doing and telling and teaching and acting and this kind of thing. And it's their nature, as we said earlier. They can't help but be this way by virtue of the planet and the gland and this transmission / communication that's happening between the planet and the gland in such a way as to affect psychology and then affect behavior.
And to touch on this idea at the beginning, so one can have a woman that is strikingly beautiful and considered to be a symbol of beauty, as a feminine, winning Miss Universe, but she's a masculine, active type. Yeah, so that's very possible. And at the same time, one can have a handsome man, very likable and charismatic, and some man, yet comes as a feminine passive type. Yes, and we'll see that as we go into each type, and also maybe with photos or at least names of people, it'll become more obvious.
And again, these types balance in this way. If you look on the right, you see the moon, the lunar type is passive and feminine. And in this case, we'll get into it, also negatively charged. On the left side, corresponding to it, to balance it, to offset it, is this Saturn type, which is the reverse, the obverse of all of those. It's active. and it's positively charged, and it's more masculine in its psychological approach. And the same you see with Mercury and Jupiter, or jovial, and Venus and Mars. They offset each other and balance each other. And as we'll also mention perhaps later, there's an attraction between types that is natural. And so it's no accident that in the Saturn and the lunar type are attracted to one another. And when you look at the breakdown of what we've just said, this is very understandable. The active is drawn to the passive. The masculine is drawn to the feminine. The passive is drawn to the active, and so on. And it's true with each of these pairs of types. So the jovial Jupiter and the mercurial type are naturally drawn to each other in human nature, and the Martial and the Venus type. And it's interesting too. These types, of course, these names derive from Greek. That's how the planets were named. They were named after the Greek and Roman gods, and that's where these names have come from. And of course, Adonis is Mars, and Venus is, who is Venus?
Aphrodite.
Aphrodite.
Mhm.
And so anyhow, the types are naturally drawn to one another. Why? Because of this passive, positive, active, negative, masculine, feminine makeup.
Mm.
It's not an accident that we are attracted to certain people, and it's not an accident that we are repelled by certain people. Two people who are both active may not be as easy, may not get along as easily as if one is more active and one is more passive. If two people are both negatively charged, it's difficult for them to share the same space. But if one is actively charged and the other is negatively charged, now there can be a correspondence, a balance, a mutual exchange, a circulation that feels more natural. And we'll get into that more as we study
Yeah.
the individual types.
Yeah. I mean, since we are here, you'll see there is some kind of maximum attraction, which usually tends to be, also charged with sexuality and polarity and emotional and relationships. So there are types that have that. There are types that have some kind of repulsion. It doesn't mean that they have to be enemies or anything, but it's just, I don't feel it. There's some kind of doesn't jive somehow with them. And we know these examples. And this is based just because they are not matching. They are not matching the vibration emanations. And then there are some other types that have more of a partial polarity or can end up a good working relationship, but not perhaps not ideal for a romantic relationship. And there are some other types that are more like a neutral. They are kind of neutral towards each other. But let's go to the last parameter of the active, and I like how you put it, actively charged and negatively charged. And to,
Well, positively charged, yeah.
yeah, right, positive
Like
and
a battery, like polarization. There's a positive terminal and a negative terminal. And that's how electricity is able to flow. And this is true between the types.
I guess when I learned this initially, the shortest explanation was that the positive type sees the glass half full, and the negative type sees the glass half empty. So there's more like a optimistic, positive outlook on life. Like, be like, oh, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna make this happen. It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry. It's yeah, we got this. And the negative type is not that it's negative, expressing negative emotion, or it's like not good, but there's more like an approach of, I don't know, seeing the problem. I can see the problem. I can easily see the problem. I can see what not go well, and the sense that things may not go so well.
And this relates too to what we've talked about before, the centers, the four centers. And each of the centers has a positive half and has a negative half. And you could say that positive types, those who are positively charged, they tend to view life more through the positive halves of centers. It's automatic for them. And those who are negatively charged, it's almost as though the negative halves of their centers are more charged. And so that's governing their psychological outlook, and it's governing even their metabolism. Someone who's passive and negatively charged may have more digestive problems, believe it or not, than someone who's active. and positively charged, and their metabolism is working quickly and easily and fluidly. And so it has an effect, as we've been saying, physiologically as well as psychologically. So these parameters, negative, passive, feminine, active, and so on, these have an effect on the entire container, the entire body, entire mind as a unit.
And to link some of the topic that we previously discussed, that is very essential for studying oneself and waking up, is the study of chief feature. It's like a chief mechanicality, chief weakness, area where we are most asleep in some kind of pattern. Actually, although we talked about those in previous talks, remember we did about dominance, power, tramp, vanity, self-pity, all of that. So actually, we talked about them not in the context of body types. However, you will see as we go into each body type that each body type has a tendency towards a certain chief feature. Yeah, so we are going to, that will be a big part of the study later. And
before we leave this, it is worth mentioning, we will go into this in more detail when we talk about each type. But note here, we've put the endocrine glands that correspond with each type. And the idea is the moon has a particular influence over our pancreas, that Mercury has a particular influence over our thyroid gland. Planet Venus has a particular influence over the parathyroid gland, and so on with Mars and the adrenal glands, Jupiter with what's called the posterior pituitary gland. There's a pituitary gland up in our brain, and it's the back side of it. And the front side of it is the anterior pituitary, which governs more the Saturn type and is the result, theoretically, of the influence of the planet Saturn. And we'll be going more and more into detail about this. In the case of the sun, the solar type, it's said to influence the thymus gland. And we'll be explaining what that means. That's that gland that's in our solar plexus, right up above our heart. And the solar type, by the way, although it tends to be positively charged, and an active type can be a combination of masculine and feminine in its chemistry and its chemical nature. And this can cause a person to appear almost androgynous. You'll see sometimes someone and you're not sure at first whether they have a masculine or a feminine kind of emanation and chemistry. And that's often an indication of this type. Whereas the other types usually are pretty much weighted on the side of either masculine or feminine in terms of their chemistry. That's more detail, but we'll be breaking all of that out in subsequent videos.
all right, I feel we covered some of these general themes that touch on all types, and I guess some any closing thoughts we have here. I had one more, like in terms of the benefit of knowing this, or why. It does help to, many of us, we have this, like, man, why do I do that? Why I keep having this? Why this person is doing this? Some kind of, we are spinning or chewing on trying to understand where is this coming from, this tendency, this I keep having the same partners, or something keeps happening, and then we are philosophizing about it, like, well, maybe it's because God this, or because my life, or maybe because of something that happened in childhood. So we are trying to, as human beings, they are meaning-making animals. Somehow we're trying to make meaning of certain happenings in our life. So to me, I found that the detailed and experiential knowledge of the type, they help me understand certain things about my mechanics, as well as other people's mechanics, and help me understand in a way that it puts it to rest. It's like, oh yeah, of course they do that because they are Mercury, and they have this like quick, fast is going to very likely may want to trick me, or some kind of understanding and acceptance of the situation. Yeah, And in the fourth way, the fourth way man's pill is myself as I am and things as they are. So although we are actively trying to change something, we are trying to change our level of consciousness and to change the wrong work of centers and to change to not be leaking energy in a lot of unconscious, mechanical, useless behaviors, or to diminish the state of identification. So there are a lot of things we can change. At the same time, there are some things that we cannot change. And this is connected with some center of gravity, body type, certain tendencies, where we can just accept them and integrate them in our work in a way that they don't block the work, but may just support the work.
Yes, we're trying to learn how to be less and less identified with ourselves and with other people, and more conscious as awareness. And again, this is a study of what consciousness awareness is not. And we're, in a way, this information, this tool of body types, is a way of teaching the mind to comprehend as best it can, which is still very limited, but to teach the mind to understand that it and the body are not consciousness. And at the same time, this is a tool like a lens that enables awareness to start looking at all of this phenomena in such a way as to understand it is not what it is looking at. It is that which is seeing all of this, and it is the source of this seeing that it is really in pursuit of. We're not trying to become a different person or a better person, or this tool enables us to see we are a certain way, and any improvements that we can make are going to be the result of us being less identified with the feeling of identity in our type and in our body, in our mind. And to understand, everything I just said is on a personal scale, it's on the individual scale, but to understand we are not separate from the larger whole. What Mihai likes, that expression, the bigger picture. Yes, we are not separate. Everything's connected. We are a little, our body and our mind are like a little cog in this enormous machinery, and it's all connected. It's all working together. And the more we understand this, the less and less isolated we feel. Even if I'm a particular body type and I manifest a certain way, I look a certain way, I have certain psychological proclivities, and regardless, I'm connected. I'm part of this. It's all one. And we're not this tool can help us integrate back into the whole, which we are already a part of. We just don't realize it. We tend to isolate ourselves and take everything personally and make everything about me. And when we learn about type, there's a tendency to do that too. So we want to be careful and realize, no, this isn't just about knowing more about myself. It's about understanding how we are connected to the whole.
All right, Peter, thank you. And everyone, stay tuned. We are going to go into individual types next few talks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mihai.